Michael's gonna share for about 5 minutes her testimony. But the thing with This Is Us, you're not gonna be able to share everything in 5 minutes. But we do want to create opportunity for you to come back. So if you've ever got more to share about your testimony, please, let's do it. Come back.
Every time we do this,
yeah.
I was going to share this. Every time they do this, I see a connection with them, or I discern a similar path or story.
Yes.
So make sure that the This Is Us is the introduction, and then that we go to that person and try to have coffee with them or whatever. Then
get to know them.
We grow as a family.
Yes.
And we empower each other.
Absolutely.
But there's so many different aspects of your story that if you've done This Is Us, do it again, because you cover a different aspect of your story.
Because you're growing.
Absolutely.
You're growing.
All right, Michael.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Without the mic?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I grew up in a very abusive home environment. My stepfather was very emotionally, physically, sexually abusive. I saw my mother beat beyond recognition on numerous occasions. I would always try to save her, hiding my younger siblings from his rage. I learned how to fight. And it became my way of life. It was fight or be fought, or be beaten. I started using drugs at a very young age to try to numb the pain. When you grow up in that kind of environment, you either become against what is happening to you, or you become the same as the abuser. And in my circumstance, I became the same as my abuser. I became very angry. I became very hateful and very abusive to others. Verbally, physically, it was nothing for me to just see you on the street and just go out of my mind in a rage. I was a very rageful person. In 1993, I, in a drunken stupor, had a sexual relationship, the first time with a man, and I became pregnant with my son, which was something, being a lesbian from a very early age. I decided that, I didn't want my son I had to change at that point when I found out I was pregnant. I had to change my way of life, my way of thinking, because I didn't want him to experience everything that I went through. I started seeking counseling. I started going to NA meetings. I never really worked the steps in the NA meetings. I'd listen and I'd share my story, but it was more, when they spoke about the spirituality part of it, the God that they spoke of, I didn't know. God wasn't a part of my life growing up. I didn't understand how there could be a God that would allow a child to suffer. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
When my son was 4, I decided to relocate to a small town. I wanted to get him out of the big city schools and give him a better chance at a good education. The house that I ran across a house, and I wanted to get him situated in this town. He was fixing to start school, or pre-K, and when I inquired about it, the previous occupant had left everything they owned. The landlord described it as him and his wife and kids, 5 kids, just up and vanished one day. So I made a deal with the landlord, and I was going to clean out all 3 buildings on the property and turn around and in lieu of the first year rent-free, with the option to buy later. The 3 buildings that were on the property was the main house. There was a little one room building that I was going to make a fort for him, and then there was a 2-car garage. Well, 2 weeks after I moved into the house, I cleaned out the front of it, and the landlord drove down the driveway every day and climbed into a combine behind that he parked, and he worked the fields around the house. So we saw each other coming and going in the mornings. And in that 2 weeks that I got the house cleaned up, I came home one night and I had all the appliances that I needed. And when I pulled up in the driveway, I ran in the house. I had a kid with me that was going to help me unload everything, and I ran in the house to use the bathroom. and there's a cop car that went so close to my bathroom window, I made eye contact with the officer. And when I stepped out of the bathroom, he had his guns drawn, and they were threatening me with arrest because they said they'd been watching the house, and it was a drug house. So the landlord is off in the field, and he's working the field, and he comes over to see what's going on. And I'm trying to figure out what this officer is doing. They've got all these guns all over us. And to make a long story short, they ended up arresting me for manufacturing methamphetamines, maintaining a dwelling, possession of CDS, and possession of paraphernalia. And they took me to jail. The landlord told them there's got to be, he told them right then and there, there's got to be a mistake. She just came in this property, all this stuff in this back room, because the meth lab was in the garage on the property. And the only thing that I had touched in that building so far was a couple of tools that I had scooted back so that I could put my tools in and load my tools and stuff when I come in. So they took me to jail, and I sat in jail for 90 days on a $250,000 bond that I couldn't make. And in that 90 days that I was in there, I was in a 6-man cell. We had 6 bunks connected to the walls, a shower and bathroom. But there was, at times, especially on weekends, it was the only jail for women, the only cell for women, and there would be as many as 20 of us in that one cell. Well, there you had women that would come in and minister, and they would flip open the bean hole where they passed our trays to us. The cell door was never open unless somebody was going to court. And when they passed our food, in our trays, and these ladies would come and minister, and they would open that, so some of the girls would go and kind of gather around the door. And I never was one of those people, but being the oldest one in that cell, not physically oldest, but the one that's been there the longest, my bunk was right by the door. And I got to where I would listen to what they were saying, but I would watch TV. I wouldn't run to the door like a lot of them did, because I didn't know who they were talking about. So I was trying to get a bond reduction so that my family could probably get me out, because they had been trying everything that they could to be able to come up with that money or property or something. And that morning I had court at 9 o'clock, and I got up and I just got in the shower and I raised my hands up and I said, God, if you're real, you gotta prove yourself to me, because I know nothing. So 9 o'clock came and went. Noon rolled around and they're passing out lunch trays, and I asked the guy, I said, hey, what happened to my court? Oh, they put you back another month. I said, well, my family's still downstairs. Is there any way you can, let me see them? And he says, yeah, let me check, see if they're still there, and I'll come back and get you. So he walked me downstairs, and I'm shackled. I have shackles on my hands and on my feet, and I'm in an orange jumpsuit. And I walked in, and my mom, when we rounded the corner, it's lunchtime, and all the courtrooms are empty. And there's 2 men sitting with cowboy hats and business suits on one side, and then my family's on the other. My mom walked up to me, and I remember lifting my arms up to put them around her to hug her. And she's crying, and she's like, I don't know what we're gonna do. We can't get your bond lowered, we can't get you out. And this cowboy walks up to me and he says, are you Michael Powell? And I said, yes. And he goes, I'm assuming this is your mom? And I said, yes, it is. He says, I think I've had conversations with you. And he said, I'm Joe Bob Bondy, the local bondsman in town. And my mom immediately got defensive, and she's like, yeah, I've talked to you several times. And he looked back at me and he said, ma'am, are you a Christian? And I said, no, not really. I don't know that much about God, just what I've been here since I've been here. And he said, well, I'm a Christian man, and he says, when God tells me to do something, I have to do it. And so I just kind of listened to him, and he said, God told me that I needed to get you out of here and get you into this. So when he said that, I just kind of looked at him, and he said, I need you to get ready in the morning. He looked at my mom, and he says, I want you to be at my office at 8 o'clock in the morning. And he said, you be ready to leave by 9. So at 9 o'clock the next morning, I walked out of the jail. I fought my case for 20 months. In that 20 months, they were offering me 20 years. And here I am with a 4-year-old son that has no other parent but me. So I told him, I said, there's no way that I'm gonna sign for 20 years. You guys, I'm not gonna do it. So I said, I'll just take it to jury trial. Well, I'd hired an attorney in that 20 months, and he kept telling me it's gonna be okay, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. When I come to trial, he was asleep the first 2 days. I'd never been in trouble before. I didn't know that I could just fire him in the middle of my trial and get somebody else. So, as it ended out, on the 3rd day, the jury went out at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and at 9 o'clock that night, they were still hung. And my attorney told me, he said, I've got meetings in Oklahoma City. We're 45 minutes from there. He says, I've got to get back. And I said, okay. So he left the building, and 5 minutes after he walked out, they come back with guilty on everything, and they yanked my bond. And they put me back in, they took me back upstairs to the jail, but this time they've got a brand new cell that they're opening up for women. And they stuck me in that cell, and I don't know how many was in the other cell, but during that time, I'm in a cell by myself. And I was, when I was out that 20 months, I was going to church, I was learning about God, I was doing what I needed to do to try to, keep my life. And when they found me guilty, my mom almost lost it. She was like, I can't believe this. Then they come over and they said, we have to revoke your bond. We're going to put you back upstairs. And I told my mom, I remember telling my mom, it's okay, I'm okay. It was just an overwhelming peace. I don't know, I didn't know where it came from, but I just felt God tell me, you're going to be okay. And so I went back to jail, and I think it was about 2 months that I sat there in this jail. Women would come and go, and a couple of girls from the other jail, I guess there'd been a big fight, and they had transferred them over, and they're like, oh, this is the Christian cell, it's so peaceful and quiet in here. They felt that peace and quiet that I had always felt while I was there. So they sent me, it was about 40 days for my sentencing, and when I went to the sentencing court, I had 4 counts. I had manufacturing, maintaining a dwelling, possession of CDS, possession of paraphernalia. And on those 4 charges, at my sentencing, they sentenced me to the max, which was 36 years. Now this is my first offense ever in trouble. I didn't even have speeding tickets on my record. And as many things as I had done in my past that I should have been arrested for, things that I could never forgive myself for, but I found grace through God. Yeah. I went to prison. When I went, it was unbelievable that I found so much favor with everybody there. I didn't have to go back to my old self. I didn't have to be the hardcore. There was maybe 1 or 2 instances. But for the most part, I found favor with everybody that I was presented with. I had a good job while I was in there. I learned a lot of stuff while I was in there. And I was okay. 18 months after I got in, I won an appeal. And during that appeal, they took off. My charges were manufacturing were 20 years, maintaining was 5 years, and they reduced that one to a fine, and they took the manufacturing off. So I was left with a 10 and a 1, 11-year total that I served 4.5 years on. My son was 5 when I went in and 9 when I come out. After I got out of prison and started rebuilding my life, when I was in work release, right before I got out, I went to church a lot, and there were some churches that were, we went as a prison group, and there were some that was okay, and there were some that really didn't preach what I've been reading in the Bible. And there was one in particular that my son and I went to. A friend of mine brought him to see me, and the guy based his judgment of me on my appearance. And I told him, I said, it's the first day that I've even come to your church. You know, why are you attacking me when you don't even know me? And so there was some churches that I had to walk away from. When I got out of prison, I stopped going to church and I just started focusing on trying to rebuild my life. And till a friend of mine called me, she was still incarcerated, and she said, hey, there's a church that's picking us up, it's really good, it's not like all the other ones, and she said, I want you to come. So, at this point, Liz and I are together, and I hadn't even said anything to her about going to a church or my passion and the things that I had decided in prison that I wanted to be a part of. And so we went, I asked her to go and check out the church with me, and we went, and it was a very loving church. The pastors, you know, God is all over him. He oozes God. And it was, they were involved with the prison ministry. They would go to the prison and pick girls up, and I just walked up to him the first day and told him, I said, I want to be a part of this. I want to give back. I want to help the women that are incarcerated. So he put me in touch with the lady that's in charge of the prison ministry. And Liz and I got involved. We were going and picking the girls up. We were cooking for them. There, after service, we would stay 2 hours and let them visit with their family and stuff. So prison ministry has always been, you know, since then and since my experience, it's something that I'm very, very excited to be involved with. It's something that I look forward to. I feel like God has placed a calling on me. So when we got out here last November, I finally went ahead and called Madison County Jail and spoke with them. They said that they would put my name on the list, and I was 23rd on the list. And I know that a prison ministry is a dedication that you have to stay with and make. And when you make it, it's not something you just do half-heartedly. You have to be wholeheartedly in it. Being 23rd on the list, I thought, you know, they probably won't call me for a year. And they called me the other day. It's been about a week and a half ago, and we've been talking about it a little bit. And I just asked for prayers while we try to see if we can qualify for it. See if we can get in there to minister to those. If one person could hear the testimony, and if I can just change one life, amen. That's good. That's right.
Awesome.